Good evening and welcome back to the Pastor Study. We are living in a time where in many places in the world it is very dangerous to be a Christian. The stories that come out of some of the countries in Africa, for example, Nigeria is a very, very dangerous place to be as a Christian. Conservative estimates say that over 8,000 Nigerian Christians were slaughtered in 2023 alone. In fact, the estimate is that well over half of the martyrs in the world every year are in Nigeria. I've spoken with some of the pastors and evangelists that we support in Africa, and I've heard their stories of being attacked by, being attacked by Muslims, being tortured by Muslims, having death threats and death attempts on their lives, and yet they continue to do ministry. Maybe that's not all that surprising. Listen to what Jesus told his disciples in Matthew 24. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death. And you will be hated by all nations because of me. And at that time many will turn away from the faith and will betray, and they will hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of the wickedness, the love of many will grow cold, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to the nations. And then the end will come. In John chapter 15, Jesus speaks to the disciples and says, if the world hates you, keep in mind it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. And that is why the world hates you. But that's not unique to us as Christians. God's people, the Jews, have been hated from their very inception in the Old Testament. Probably two of the greatest stories that we read are found in Daniel. Certainly Daniel chapter 6 is one that's well known. We learned it as children. That's Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel's caught praying to God in direct opposition of the law that has been passed. Now, he and the king are friends, but some of Daniel's co-leaders are not Jews, and they are certainly not his friends. So they work out a deal by which the king will put anybody to death that prays to anybody else other than the king's God. Well, then they come and tattletale on Daniel. The king has no choice but to carry out the law. As he throws Daniel down into this den of hungry lions, they're kept down in this cave. You're thrown in through a hole in the top, and a boulder's rolled over the top overnight. Presumptions the lions just saw dinner tumbling down from the sky. But as the king sees him watches him being lowered down, he says, "May the God that you serve save you." And of course, we know the story. The next morning, that's exactly what happens. And the king then proclaims, may anybody who says anything against Daniel's God be put to death. But the story that I love the most, also in the book of Daniel, but this is in Daniel chapter 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is the story, or the three men. We know them as the three Hebrew children. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, has decided he's a pretty good guy. And he's so good, he creates this huge gold statue of himself, meters high, 90 feet if I remember correctly, and declares that everyone will come and fall down and worship that golden image. And of course everybody does, except for Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, the three Hebrews, the three Jews who have committed their lives to Yahweh. The king goes and has them brought before him, and he's angry, he's frustrated, he's embarrassed. And he tells them what's going to happen if they don't. They're going to be thrown in the fire and burned. And I love what they said. Their statement of faith echoes down through the ages. O King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you on this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. Well, as you can well imagine, the king was not amused by their statement, and he had them bound up, tied up, the fire stoked 7 times hotter, and in they went. The fire being so hot that it literally consumed the men that were throwing them in. But then the king looked in a few minutes later and says, whoa, I see 4 people in there. Did we just throw in 3? And one of them looks like the Son of the gods. Of course, we know that to be the pre-incarnate Christ. But I love their statement of faith. But even if he does not, we will not worship your gods or serve your gods. Wow, what faith. And you see, that's not just an Old Testament issue dealing with persecution. In writing to the Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul says, I've been in prison, I've been flogged severely, I've been exposed to death 5 times. 5 times I've gotten the 40 lashes minus 1 with the cat of 9 tails, the same type of whip that they used on Jesus. I've been lashed by, I've been beaten with rods, I've been stoned, I've been shipwrecked 3 times. We only know of 1 in detail, but he tells the Corinthians 3 times. King Aretas, the king of Damascus, attempted to arrest Paul, to throw him into prison. Paul was let down over the wall in a basket, and off he went to escape. And the list goes on and on and on down through the centuries. Now, it comes to us today. We are fortunate not to live in Nigeria or some of those countries that are where it's dangerous to live as a believer. But that's not to say it couldn't come to us. That's not to say that we may not find ourselves traveling sometime and find ourselves in a place where that could happen. Let me suggest that the preventative, or maybe the support for our faith, needs to be the kind of faith that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had. That their statement of faith that God will protect us, but even if he doesn't, we will not violate our faith and worship anybody else. Men and women are saying that every day in many countries to Islam, because they're given the choice of convert to Islam or be martyred, be tortured, be killed, and they are choosing Jesus. So let me suggest that for us to bury our head in the sand and say it couldn't happen here it's not a very smart way to look at it, because it is happening other places. It could happen here. Our faith needs to be of such a place that we can say, my God will provide no matter what the situation, and then trust him. And even if we find ourselves on the short trip to his throne room, we understand that we win the battle even then. So let me leave you with that thought. The world we live in may not be as safe as we think it is. Certainly today in Georgia, just north of Atlanta, they found that out with another school shooting. The last I heard was 2 teachers, 2 children have been killed, and 9 more in the hospital, apparently shot by a 14-year-old student. I don't know any other details other than to say the world we live in is becoming an increasingly more dangerous place. Our faith needs to become increasingly stronger as we face these issues. And I'll leave you with that thought, and I look forward to seeing you next week back in the Pastor Study.